Hello, this is Sketch, and I'm slightly sick, so I really shouldn't be recording something this long. Nonetheless, I was given the challenge, if you will, to create a rebuttal to a rant that an associate of mine made. So, here goes. Furiousreviewer argues that Zoro and Sanji are on similar footing, Sanji has a bit of an edge. I'm gonna have to very much disagree with that. I believe if anybody has an edge, it's probably Zoro. Now, it is true that Zoro does fight stronger enemies. That's pretty much how the story's written. Zoro usually fights the number 2 guy against whatever enemy they're dealing with. Now, he told me that this can only go up to Skypiea, so I will only be going up to that point. In fact, I won't even go that far. I'll mostly focus on things that happened before that. So, here goes. Now, he argues that Sanji could easily defeat Mr. One, or at least defeat him without taking as much damage as Zoro did. I disagree. Sanji might be able to defeat Mr. One. It's pretty obvious that only someone who could match up to Mr. One's blades could hope to defeat him. That said, Luffy would be cut to shreds, and Sanji likely would as well. Even if Sanji can stop swords with his feet, Mr. One's whole body is a sharp edge. Don't you think that would cut up Sanji pretty badly? Sanji could not kick Mr. One without taking damage himself, and in the end that damage would be a lot. You couldn't use mere force to defeat Mr. One. The only way to block him is to use something that couldn't be cut. And the only way to hurt him was to cut through him. Merely a force blow, I don't see how that would work, because he's a whole blade. His whole body acts like a blade. Sure, you can break a blade, even a steel blade, but you'd still get cut up. So in this case, it's really more the nature of the enemy than anything else. Mere strength won't be able to decide the fight, but the type of fighter might. For instance, the only person who could defeat Eneru was Luffy, because Luffy was a rubber man, and thus didn't conduct the electricity. Since Sanji can block swords, it can be theorized that he could defeat Mr. One, but I would wager he would have a hard time doing so, as there is no safe place to attack Mr. One without an equal or sharper blade to fight him with. So let's go on to Zoro fighting Mr. Two. I'd say Zoro might have a bit of trouble with Mr. Two in a serious fight, but he wouldn't be distracted by the illusions like Sanji was. Thus Mr. Two wouldn't be able to get in the cheap hits that he got in on Sanji. Zoro could cut up Mr. Two pretty badly given the opportunity. If he did away with Mr. Two's legs by cutting them up, Mr. Two would lose his ability to fight back. Because it has been shown that Sanji can block Zoro's swords and evade being cut, it is likely that Zoro would not have this chance against Mr. Two, at least not enough to be able to fully disable him. However, Zoro can pick up a house and drop it on someone. I really don't think Mr. Two would be able to take that kind of damage as easily as Mr. One did. Now, could Sanji defeat Don Krieg? Yes, I believe Sanji could defeat Don Krieg. He had plenty enough force to be able to do it as Luffy did. He probably could have beat him easier than Luffy, because he wouldn't have had that whole drowning issue. So there's no argument there. Now, could Zoro defeat Don Krieg? I believe Zoro could defeat Don Krieg. The theory is that Zoro wouldn't be able to defeat Don Krieg without being able to cut through the armor. But Zoro has plenty of physical strength as well. He does train all the time. I expect Zoro would be able to generate enough force to defeat Don Krieg using force. Likewise, I think both Sanji and Zoro could potentially have defeated Arlong, but as per the storyline, it wasn't really their place to do so. Sanji surely could have beat Hachan, and Zoro probably could have beaten Kurobe. Yeah, I'm sure he could have beaten Kurobe. Both of them have fought far stronger opponents since then, and like I said, I'm pretty sure both of them could have beat Arlong themselves, but that wasn't their place. Are both of them holding back? I imagine both of them are holding back, but I'd also wager that Zoro is holding back maybe a little bit more, especially at the point of the Davy Back fight when they're squabbling. Now, I know I said I wouldn't go any further than Skypiea, but since he even put in a picture of the Davy Back fight, I figured it's fair game. Now, when they're squabbling, they seem to be fighting on equal footing when Zoro has his swords, and they also seem to be fighting on equal footing when Zoro doesn't have his swords. What I think Furiousreviewer seems to be overlooking is the slapstick nature of One Piece. In moments of slapstick, weaker characters show a tremendous amount of strength. For instance, Nami punching out both Luffy and Zoro when they were fighting. Could she do that in a serious fight? Of course not. Likewise, whenever Sanji or Zoro beats down a beast, or whatnot, it's all for slapstick, and it doesn't really indicate actual strength. I believe Don Krieg throwing that boat was also a moment of slapstick, and not to be taken too seriously. Whereas, say, when Zoro dropped a freaking house on Mr. One, it was actual strength. And lest we forget, Zoro carried around that massive cage with Luffy inside for quite a distance back in the Buggy storyline, well before they even met Sanji. Keep in mind Zoro trains all the time, so by the time they fought Krieg, he probably would have been able to knock away that boat very easily, but he probably would have cut it to ribbons instead, as that's pretty much his style. So even if that boat kick wasn't slapstick, Zoro could have done as well, or bested that easily. Another theory Furiousreviewer has is that Sanji could break Zoro's swords. The first ones? Yeah, probably. They didn't take that much to break, but then again, Mihawk broke them. So I guess that probably was a significant amount of force. Now, the swords that he got in Logtown, those are significantly stronger, at least they're believed to be. I imagine they'd have to be, considering they've been through so much, even up to the Skypiea saga. Honestly, I don't believe Sanji could break Zoro's swords. And even if he could break them if Zoro wasn't using them properly, Zoro can generate enough force to prevent this from happening. Zoro can cut through steel. The question is, can Sanji break steel? I don't assume so, but it's possible in One Piece. Pretty much anything is. Now to use some material from far later in the series. Sanji eventually does learn how to fight with his foot covered in fire, finally proving that it's not just Zoro who can do that kind of attack. But let's keep in mind, Zoro learned how to do that way back in Little Garden, so he's had that for quite a while. Granted, he hasn't used it since. Furiousreviewer is implying that Sanji was taught by Zeph, but why would Zeph teach him how to fight? He probably didn't even teach him how to cook. Sanji at most emulates him. And even if he was trained by Zeph, does that make him a better fighter? No, not unless Zeph is a better fighter than Zoro. And I think there's enough evidence pointing that Zoro could defeat Zeph, and Sanji most likely could defeat Zeph as well. Zeph is very strong for a retired pirate, mind you, but in the grand scheme of One Piece, he's relatively weak, and I doubt he could beat Mr. 2 as Sanji did. And I think for the most concrete reason as to why it should be believed that Zoro is at least a little bit stronger than Sanji, even back in the Skypiea arc, is simply this. Oda wrote this story in a manner that makes Zoro's strength as a fighter and a swordsman very important. Sanji strives to be a great cook and to find the All Blue, where there's every kind of fish in the sea. Zoro's goal is to surpass Mihawk so that he can become the greatest swordsman. Zoro is a strong guy from the beginning, and so is Sanji. But while they are often shown in equal footing, I believe that there is at least enough evidence that shows Zoro could best Sanji back in Skypiea, much less now, several storylines beyond that point. I believe it was always Oda's intention for Zoro to be stronger, but not too much stronger than Sanji, just enough to be stronger. Thank you for listening to my rant, or perhaps rebuttal, as it were, to Furiousreviewer's Why Sanji is Better Than Zoro. I hope you feel the same way as I do. And if not, hey, that's cool. We all have our opinions.